Welcome back. I cut David off very rudely last time when talking about the infallibility of human memory. I don't know whether people remember that. No, is that no? Sorry, no, that wasn't funny. Right, we are back. David, thanks so much for joining us again. We're talking about AI. Just a quick summary of what we talked about before. There's a couple of different ideas that popped up. We talked about the proponents of time when it comes to AI-based memory. And then we talked about human ability and human accuracy, particularly with regards to a lot of these things, because people get caught up on the fact that the AI is only 90% accurate. But actually, humans are famously inaccurate, and so actually 90% accuracy is probably pretty good for a lot of things. Not everything, but the whole thing, decision matrix sort of stuff when it comes to outputs of models. That's a sort of technical side of things, but there's a whole kind of element here. What I did cut you off from, though, was telling us about the Disney study with regards to infallibility of human memory. So let's unleash David. Go.
Yeah, so one of my favourite studies. 120 people went to Disney World, and at the end of the day, they were taken aside, and an ad agency said, "Look, we'd like to put some copy in front of you. Would you please evaluate and tell us what works and what doesn't?"
Yeah.
They binned them into 4 different groups, 30 people, and the first group went into a blank room, was shown copy, and Bugs Bunny did not appear on the ad copy.
Right.
Second group went into a blank room, Bugs Bunny was in the ad copy. Third group went into the room, no ad copy with Bugs Bunny, but a cardboard cutout of him in the corner. And the fourth group had both. He was in the cutout and he was in the copy. And they went through different ads, different things, got them to do questionnaires, like what you would expect from an ad agency looking at information from users.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, they asked everybody if they remembered meeting Bugs Bunny in the park. And 30% of the third group and 40% of the final group said that they remembered meeting Bugs Bunny, who's Warner Bros., not Disney. So they're competitors. They would never be in the same environment. They are not in the park.
Right.
But yeah, between 30 and 40% of the users or the visitors said they actually remembered shaking hands with Bugs Bunny.
Christ, I mean, it's interesting. It reminds me of what's the effect called? I can't remember it. When people, misremember things en masse, like Luke, I am your father. Like he never says Luke, and yet everyone swears that he does. I mean, even I do. I'm sat here now going like, no, he actually does, and yet he didn't. But we all kind of collectively misremembered this thing. Like it's we talked about AI hallucinations. I mean, this is the human version of it, right? Like,
I mean, it would be a version of human hallucination. I think in this scenario, it's the suggestion, it's the power of suggestion. It's the idea that you can implant a thought in somebody and it can mingle with a memory.
mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the other things that comes through with human memory formation is it's state dependent. So if you're doing revision for an exam and you're getting drunk while you're doing it, go into the exam drunk because you're not going to be able to access the memory of anything you've revised if you aren't drunk.
Right.
Your brain, it doesn't just record in a synapse what happened. It records sort of your own biochemistry at the time, your own what you were thinking, the pathways that ran through, the complex myriad. So there is no such thing as a photographic memory.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing, isn't it? Because interestingly, when I was younger, they thought I might have some sort of learning disability. I remember I wrote letters backwards, something that happens quite a lot in dyslexics. But it turns out that I have a bottom 5% sort of short-term memory, and so I often find people are like, "Oh, that thing that happened yesterday." I'm like,
Wow. Yeah.
and yet.
Speaking of, have you got that tenner for me that you promised me yesterday?
Oi, come. Um, interestingly, though, I have an odd memory for facts, and so I have this kind of like people are like, how is your memory so bad when you can literally like recite your phone number from 20 years ago, or your the fact that you read last week, or and I think I've got a kind of personal view here of like how weird memory can be, and how like I'm like, I swear that thing happened. Like, oh, one weird one, right? Like, I swear that I once went to a house at the base of a volcano, but I'm pretty certain that's never happened because I don't know where the house is, and I don't know of houses at the bottom of a volcano. And I
Hmm.
remember looking up, and the volcano was not like silent and inactive. It was actually, there was it was a bit Mount Doomy, should we say? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I have this memory so clearly. I can sit here and think right now. I can picture driving up to the house. I can picture the inside of the house. And I can picture walking out and looking and seeing the volcano. And like, I categorically also know that this didn't happen
Yeah.
because, or well, I believe that it didn't happen. Maybe it did.
Well, it's interesting. I think most people have similar stories because I remember dreaming about a place in France,
Right.
Eiffel Tower, as a really young boy, and I remember later visiting it and actually being in the place and having a deja vu moment of, oh, hang on a minute, I've seen this before.
Right.
But again, it's not. I'm not saying it's a real thing. It's something that I've experienced that I haven't experienced. It's a bit like deja vu. It's a phenomenon. Like
Mhm.
every person will say they've had an experience of deja vu, that they are watching something that they have already seen play out.
Yeah.
And there have been some phases in my life where I've regularly had it and others where I've not. I did find at one point, if I tried to break the deja vu, so if I tried to do the opposite thing that I thought was going to happen, it would extend the deja vu,
Oh, right.
which was a very, very, very strange experience.
Gosh.
And it's happened a few times, but it's just a phenomenon. It probably is some kind of misfiring science. It's unlikely that it's a really accurate thing that we're seeing. It's more likely an inaccurate, a breakdown in something that we're experiencing rather than oh, humans have perfect recall, therefore.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you see this sort of I remember reading a story of a child who could like fairly accurately draw the inside of a German bomber from World War Two, and the immediate thinking was, okay, well, he's a reincarnated German bomber pilot. Like, okay, at first glance, this seems logical, and I really cannot say for a second whether this is true or not. It seems odd that a small child of 3 or 4 or whatever they were would be able to do this, but I think what we're really kind of pushing on here, isn't it, is that like this is weirdness within humans, and we
Yeah,
are very hypercritical of weirdness within AI, and you can see why, right? Like, it's one thing to for a human to get it wrong, and you think, oh, it was annoying, or maybe even horrifically tragic, but this is what humans do. There is some element to this, and yet when a computer does it, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel forgivable in the same way.
yeah,
It feels much worse, and I think that duality is potentially interesting, has the propensity to hold us back here, and hold us back from saying, whoa, actually, this thing's really good. Like,
yeah.
this ability to, you mentioned before, spotting cancerous spots on X-rays. The ability to do that with 90% accuracy is like, oh wow, that's a major leap forward.
I mean, the far more extreme version of that is going to be self-driving cars
Hmm.
that will crash and
Yeah.
people will die. And people will say it's unacceptable. But there are thousands of crashes every day from human issues that
Hmm.
cause death.
Yeah.
It's it, you're not going to suddenly achieve perfection.
Hmm.
It's is this an improvement on what currently exists? And if it's better, we should do it.
Yeah.
um,
I think there's an interesting question that often comes out about that self-driving car, and this is a bit of a sort of sideways tangent, but where does the liability land in
yeah,
that scenario? Because you can't kind of say, well, there's no liability because it was a computer. You also can't kind of say, oh, it's the liabilities on the person that coded it, or on the company that made it, or like, oh, where does that go? Because that's a
this
really
this
interesting.
this would be something for us to, we both know Lars. This would be something for him to discuss because I was chatting with him about this the last time we had lunch and did discuss these things. Um, and it is around things like insurance.
Hmm.
Who actually sits there with the liability? Is it the car owner? Is it the manufacturer who has developed code and put it in? Is it the third party that they've licensed the code from?
Hmm.
Um, and it's also establishing fault. Is it a breakdown in the code?
Hmm.
Or is it a mechanical issue that's caused the problem? Or is it, I mean, I suppose one advantage we semi have in some of our examples is we do have an idea of an act of God.
Hmm.
And I guess that's a natural place to fit certain things when there's a circumstance that is just completely unavoidable. Just mathematically, you just cannot create a scenario that doesn't lead to one person dying.
Hmm.
That would fall under that remit. However, how do you program who dies?
Hmm. Yeah.
Whose life is more valuable in that scenario? That means we're onto the again. Humans don't have this answer. This is the tram line,
Yeah.
the 2 point tram line discussion. Who do you pick,
Yeah.
and how does AI pick?
I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? And these are like what we mentioned in the very first episode. We talked about whether to accelerate or decelerate. Whether to say, "Oh God, this is going a bit fast. We need to kind of calm down," or whether to let it go. And we kind of agreed that there's sort of reasons for both.
Yeah,
But I think this is really really interesting. Is that we're going to come across these problems quite quickly. One of the things I've spotted quite I found very interesting recently is we've seen Boston Dynamics, building robots and doing cool stuff for a long time. They were undeniably the first to achieve the level that they've achieved. And yet, what I find really interesting is that the pace of catching up is just astronomical now. Amazon are releasing humanoid robots to do tasks within their distribution centers. Tesla are working hard on the Tesla bot, and like the Tesla bot videos are reasonably indistinguishable from the Boston Dynamics videos in terms of what they're able to do in terms of picking things up and sorting them, and stop themselves falling over and all of those things. Is the next thing, we've gone through the Bitcoin hype, then we went through the metaverse hype, now we're on the chat GPT hype. Is the next thing robotics?
I, I think there are many different technological advances taking place all at once, and some will probably be left by the wayside, and others won't. Um, AI is here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not suddenly going to disappear because the advantages of it far outstrip the negatives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've talked about it from a business perspective, and we talked about it from the positives, like how does this work, and some of the negatives around job loss and things. But actually, one of the key problems at the moment from a cybersecurity perspective is bots trying to force penetrate systems and networks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is something that AI can develop and learn. I mean, if we think about passwords, and we've already mentioned Facebook's algorithm on a previous episode of how it knows you intimately, it knows all of your history. Um, there's only so much we can do with password creation that won't be solvable. I mean, to be fair, we're also another technological advance is quantum.
Mm-hmm.
And once quantum computing is there, the logic gates of passwords are relatively done. So most passwords are cracked instantly, which kind of renders that moot if that's the advance that makes it. But I mean, there are a handful of things developing all at once that all influence each other and impact each other. So some things will fall, others will stay. I mean, mini disc was revolutionary, and then suddenly MP3 came.
I love the mini
Uh,
disc.
yeah,
Can we just have a moment's silence for the mini disc?
I do miss mine. I had a nice Sony one that was fantastic.
Just
Um,
lovely the way they clicked when they opened.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And I mean, MP3 wasn't even good.
Yeah,
I remember getting an MP3 player. They were awful things. They were really difficult to use.
yeah,
Um,
like really fiddly buttons and crappy displays, and then it's like, oh yeah, you can fit 3 albums on this.
yeah,
Oh, great.
yeah. But they lasted. And Blu-ray and HD. the same technology but competing in different ways. Who would have thought Blu-ray would win?
Yeah, I remember for a long time
Um,
everyone was saying it's HD
yeah,
DVD. Like, of course it's going to make it.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And these have always been there. You have competing technologies. Um, right now, we've got lots of competing technologies, but there are also other branches that are competing that will have an enormous. So we're talking about AI, but once we have quantum computation, large language models that take years of just feeding data and information, that can be done in a fraction. And when I say a fraction, I'm not talking like half the time. It it will be an infinitesimally small amount of time compared to what the current limits are. Um, and once that happens, once those two things come together, like we said, the very first thing is we can't predict it. We don't know what it's actually going to do because there's so many creative outlets for it. But when these two things come together, it's incredible. And if we start talking about power generation and fusion, yeah, which we're now close to having, when we talk about maybe having satellites in space that have solar reflectors that can harness that energy, when we talk about resources coming from asteroids because we're able to go and mine off planets, suddenly these things coming together. I mean, you mentioned robotics. That's one of the key areas right now is can we send unmanned robotics into space to go and mine another planet or mine an asteroid that's passing us and come back with $1 trillion worth of resources that the Earth just doesn't have anymore, or is so bound up in political fighting that you couldn't possibly access it. So that there is a smorgasbord of technology right now, and we're on the cusp on so many of these things, and it's incredibly exciting and incredibly terrifying. I mean, one of the ones that I know this was going to be, we jump into these things. One of the things that terrifies me and excites me is Elon Musk has just received approval for his
what the
implants.
Neuralink?
Yeah, the Neuralink implants, which we're starting to now talk about bringing. I mean, this isn't AI as such, this is internet, but
Yeah,
we're talking about implanting internet into people's brains directly. So translation of language becomes instantaneous.
yeah.
I mean, if we take it back to a historical model, we're almost back at the point where we could rebuild the Tower of Babylon,
Hmm.
because humans will have universal language. We'll have universal access to information instantaneously that up until this point hasn't been accessible in the way that it is now.
Mm. I think I've spotted three really interesting subjects there. One, we've talked in the past offline, and we should talk online about the kind of what we see now is not what we've got in the future. There is an awful lot of change still to come. We touched upon it in the first episode, but where can that go? What can we start to envisage will come? As you mentioned, what will quantum do? What will solid state batteries do? Toyota's talking about that. What will even like the ability to have a phone in your pocket that can last a week, and can do incredibly complex computation without being connected to the internet. What will that do? What will that do if it's now in your watch and is collecting incredible amounts of data about your body when it comes to the medical side of things? So I think there's probably a game of what if that we can play, that'll be good fun. I think the next question is what happens when AI goes physical, i.e., robotics, and then the next one is what happens when AI gets in your brain,
Yep.
because I think
Yeah.
all three of those are within our future, and not like this is the thing that I really feel is we've sat back and watched the pace of change over the last 100 years and gone, oh, that was quick. Compared to the 1,000 years that came before it, and arguably that's just getting shorter. This is no new phenomenon. The pace of change in the last 10 years is quicker than the previous 20. And I think we're
Well,
going to hit a time where this change is going to go like, oh my god, what just happened?
yep.
And I think the next 5 years are going to see more change than we've ever seen before. Look, I think we've hit our time limit for this episode. So shall we give that a wrap and move into those subjects? We'll come back and talk about one of those three that I just mentioned. If that works for you, David.
Yep. Perfect.
Excellent. Great to see you. See you soon.
See you soon.